Yasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Jaya Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Vishnu Bhagavan Bhavarati Kacharya, also Sishpadesi, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai, Amacharya Das Thakur ki jai, Prem Sukha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Gadadhar Shri Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Shri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Govardhan Shama Kunda Radha Kuda Giri Govardhan ki jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Navadip Dham ki jai, Ganga Shamona Tulsi Bhakti Devi ki jai, Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrindi ki jai, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Go Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthapurade Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pachadane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatadesha Tarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasvi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 10, chapter 66, verse 6. Yani tamasma chinnani modyat bibarshi sattvata chakvahi mam tvam sharanam no ched dehi mama avam.
Chinnani
Yani, which from you, asmat, our jnani, symbols, modhya, out of delusion, vibarshi, carry, sattvata, O chief of the sattvatas, Chatva, giving up. Ehi, come, mam, to me, tvam, you, sharanam, for shelter, na, not, who, otherwise, chet, if, dehi, give, mama, me, ahavam, battle. Translation, O Sattvata, give up my personal symbols, which out of foolishness you now carry, and come to me for shelter. If you do not, then you must give me battle. Purport, Srila Vishnu Chakravarti again interprets Panduraka's words according to the inspiration of Saraswati, the goddess of learning. Thus, they may be understood to mean, out of foolishness, I have assumed an imitation, conch shell, disc, lotus, and club, and you are maintaining these by allowing me to use them. You have not yet subdued me and got rid of these imitation symbols. Therefore, please mercifully come and liberate me by forcing me to give them up. Give me battle and grant me liberation by killing me. So here we have the story of Panduraka, which is rather amusing because Panduraka was imitating Krsna by making some imitation symbols like the conch and club and lotus and whatever. But here he's claiming that these are actually his symbols, and Krishna should give him Krishna should give Panduraka those symbols, and also not only that, but surrender to him. In other words, he's requesting Krishna to give up any pretense power and become the slave of Panduraka. And then he threatens him, if you don't do that, then you have to fight with me and I will defeat you. So, this, of course, we take as a lot of foolishness, and later we see how the yadus, when they hear him speak, they begin laughing because they know that he is completely insane, completely deluded. On the other hand, we see that here Panduraka is saying, Krishna, you're deluded. Modhyat, out of delusion, you are holding these symbols that are actually my symbols. So we have a typical example of a very materialistic person who has no belief in a Supreme Lord. On the other hand, he thinks himself that he is supreme, and therefore everyone else should serve him. Of course, in this case, this is directly in the presence of Krishna, which is very astonishing, but at the same time not astonishing. How could he make this big mistake when Krishna is personally present? But this is the nature of delusion, that we make big mistakes, not only small mistakes, but big mistakes. So, and we see this not only with Panduraka, but with other demons as well. So this is a very graphic example of foolishness. But nevertheless, if we examine all these different demons, they have the same mentality. And not only the demons here, but in fighting Hiranyakasipu, and fighting with the Nrsimhadev, or Ravana, in fighting Ramchandra, they have the same mentality. You're just an ordinary human being. Maybe you got a little punya, so you got more power and you can enjoy as a king. But I can fight with you and I can defeat you. This is their psychology, their mind. So that we see reflected here. He sees the Lord, but he doesn't see the Lord. He doesn't recognize the Lord as the Lord. So the Lord is very merciful, and he comes as avatar. That means he appears in the material world or descends into the material world from the spiritual abode, but he doesn't change his nature. And when he appears in the material world, then devotees can see him and non-devotees cannot see him. They see something there, but they don't see Supreme Lord. If the Lord doesn't appear at all, the materialists cannot see anything. But when the Lord appears in the material world, they see something. They see a form there, but that's a material form. So even if the Lord were to appear in the material world, it would not be a challenge to the materialist, because they say, no, that's nothing extraordinary. You're just an ordinary person. So when people say the Lord must show himself, it's impossible, because even if he shows himself, they won't believe it's the Lord. So this is illustrated here. The Lord is directly in front of him. He says, oh, you're an imitation. You're not the real Lord. So the remarkable feature of this particular pastime is that not only he doesn't believe that Krishna is Supreme Lord, but he himself is imitating him and believing he is Supreme Lord, which is a little bit extra foolishness. So not only he doesn't believe that Krishna is Supreme Lord when he sees him, he says, I'm actually you. I'm actually the real Supreme Lord, and you're not. And then he tries to imitate Krishna with his symbols, etc. So therefore he says here, you have to give me your symbols. You're holding them out of foolishness, but actually they're my symbols. And later on we see that he fights with Krishna, and he has his extra arms tacked onto his body, imitation arms, etc. But this all very foolish. So a very deluded person. You can say that maybe his redeeming factor, a point in his favor, is that at least he admits there is some sort of form there of the Supreme Lord, and he's trying to imitate that. However, the problem is that this is something like aham grahopasana, which means worship of oneself as the Lord, which is a procedure in some unauthorized scriptures to worship yourself as the Lord. So you take the articles and you worship yourself with those articles. This is the type of worship. So this is not authorized. But nevertheless, it is. Some people may do that, thinking that it's in some scriptures or whatever. So they think of themselves as the Supreme Lord. In this particular case, he worships himself as the Lord, and also as the form of Vasudeva with the four symbols, etc. So he's actually accepting that form of Vasudeva, but thinking, this is me. So, as in the case of impersonalists, this is quite offensive. We see that many impersonalists will merge in Brahman, and they identify with Brahman, which is also an aspect of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is Bhagavan, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So if you merge into Brahman and say, I am Brahman, this is offensive, because we're identifying ourselves with the Lord, and we're just a small particle. But we identify, I am Brahman, I am the Lord. So that's the impersonal offense. But then we got even greater offense, those people who want to merge into the Lord himself in the form of the Lord, like Paramatma. So some of the yogis, they end up merging themselves into the form of the Lord. Some will merge into his effulgence. Okay, that's also bad. Others are the Brahman. Others will merge into Paramatma himself. That's considered even worse, because you're thinking you are that form of the Lord. So both cases are offensive, because we identify ourselves as the Supreme Lord rather than being the servant of the Supreme Lord. So this is considered to be the mentality of very, very offensive people, not advised. But at the same time, it is a type of liberation. It is mukti. So jnanis and yogis strive for many lifetimes, and then eventually they get this liberation. So, in one sense, a little difficult to achieve, because they have to strive so hard for it. And then the result is something which the devotees condemn, because there is identity with the Lord, etc. So why it's condemned is because in identifying oneself as brahman or as the paramatma, etc., one cannot proceed to bhakti. So bhakti is based upon identification as being the servant of the Lord. I am the servant of the Lord. And we are different. So we're not one. We don't become the Lord in any way. We're always servant of the Lord. And we serve Him. And we try to please Him. However, something very strange happens also. Because sometimes we see identification with the Lord. And we have statements in the Upanishads, I am He, etc. Even in Upanishad, there's a Soham, I am He. So what is that? And we find it even Gopaltapadi Upanishad mentioned, I am He, etc. So one explanation is the example of the gopis. When the gopis were in separation from Krishna, what did they do? They began imitating Krishna's pastimes. And one gopi took the form of Krishna, another took the demon form, and one was Yasoda, one was Krishna, this and that. So in that pastime, often they were identifying themselves as Krishna. I'm Krishna lifting Govardhan Hill, or whatever like that. So there was an identity at that time in extreme separation from Krishna. So sometimes the devotees may also temporarily identify themselves as Krishna in great ecstasy and great separation. So there are occasions in great ecstasy when there is an identity like this. But this is not a constant mentality. And it is not motivated by envy of the Supreme Lord or rejection of the position of the Supreme Lord. So it is quite different. So therefore that type of identity with the Lord in ecstasy is quite different from this materialistic identity out of envy. However, with Krishna particularly, there is another amazing feature. And that is, though he is the Supreme Lord, he doesn't act like the Supreme Lord. He's not the master. He becomes the servant of the devotee. Now, of course, it happens with Vishnu also, because in Ambarish's case, then Lord said, I am in you, you are in me, I am your servant, I give my Sudarshan Chakra to you, so in the sense that. But with Krishna, it becomes more extreme, where Krishna is punished by Mother Yasoda and tied up by Mother Yasoda. How is that possible? Because he's Supreme Lord. And Krishna completely identifies himself like that. And he even cries and does what like that. So he's a small child. So like Krishna becomes the servant of the devotee in many ways, in extreme situations, unlike with Vishnu or Ramchandra or anyone else. So with Krishna then, there is an exchange of roles, and where Krishna becomes the servant and the other person becomes the master, particularly in Vatsalya Rasa. So there again we see a little bit of a confusion of roles. However, that does not mean that Krishna ever loses his position as being, ontologically speaking, of being Ishvara. He's always Supreme Lord, full of all Shakti, full of all powers, whatever, supreme entity, etc. But out of great bliss and devotion to his devotees, he assumes these roles, which are not imitation. He's not imitating being a little boy just to please Mother Yasoda, but actually I'm the Supreme Lord, like that. He actually identifies himself completely as being a small boy, and the son of Mother Yasoda, completely dependent on her. So he actually identifies completely with that role. And it's not an imitation at all. Krishna does this out of his bliss and his desire to give bliss to his devotees. So he becomes inferior only for that reason. So it is not a fault. It is rather a good quality. The Lord is so merciful and compassionate that he will take the role of the servant or the inferior in order to give bliss to the devotee in different ways. Therefore, even though it seems like the roles are reversed and then Krishna is no longer the Supreme, he's actually still the Supreme Lord. But he does this out of great bliss to enliven his devotees. In the beginning, we have to learn that Krishna is Supreme Lord, we are the servant of the Lord, etc. And of course, if that continues through our bhakti, then we cannot realize Krishna in Vrindavan. That's why you have to go to Raganuga to understand that. But still, it's all based upon this basic idea of Krishna is the master and I'm the servant. And based on that, we do bhakti. So even Raganuga Bhakti requires scriptural knowledge. And if we don't have that scriptural knowledge, then the Raganuga also tends to be rather weak, and it can lead to a lot of mistakes. So knowledge is necessary. We have to have knowledge of our position in relation to the Supreme Lord. And that is why we have scriptures like Bhagavatam. So here we have a very nice example given of the opposite, where a person doesn't believe in the Supreme Lord and he believes everyone else is his servant. So Krishna is the servant of Panduraka. This is Panduraka's idea. And everyone else should also be his servant. That's his idea. So this is, we can say, symbolic of the people of the material world, those who are hostile to the Lord. They are striving to be supreme. They may not clearly think like that, but nevertheless, they are the center of their own little universe, whoever that is, whatever they perceive and all the people they deal with. And they think they are the center of enjoyment, and everyone should serve them. So this is a common feature of the material world. And therefore, it's not surprising that Panduraka would do this. This is an extension of that type of mentality. We can say that in one sense, maybe his good quality, just like other demons, is that in hatred they concentrate on the form of the Lord, even if they don't believe it's spiritual. And by doing so, they get purified. So Kamsa is always thinking of Krishna, and he gets purified by that. Or Shishubala is always uttering Krishna's name in hatred and thinking of him how in previous lifetime Vishnu killed him, whatever like that. And due to that, he gets purified. So there is some advantage also in these demons who actually get to see the Lord and think of him in hatred or whatever. So similarly with Panduraka, like that. But we see that often they end up with results which in one sense are good because they get liberation, one sense bad because that liberation means they can't advance beyond that and become devotees, and therefore the devotees call liberation hellish existence. So when the Lord kills them and liberates them, it's a blessing in one sense, because this is what jnanis and yogis strive for. And it's also a blessing because the world is rid of the demon causing disturbance. But also it's a hellish existence from the point of view of the devotee, because they can't advance beyond that. So the result of the demon doing this and getting killed by the Lord is both a blessing and a curse in one sense. So in any way, the Lord, we see here, tolerates the situation. He also tends to laugh. He finds it a little bit amusing that Panduraka could be so bold as to actually imitate
Krishna and demand, give me those symbols or whatever like that. So these symbols are very special. It's not like material symbols, which are temporary. A person disguises himself as an actor into a person, then he takes up the, let's say, the symbols of the Lord, which are imitation or whatever like that, or he's playing the role of a demon and he takes up the demon's weapons, all of this. So that's material symbols or material characteristics, things that we recognize a person by. So the Lord's symbols are completely different because they're not material. They are intrinsic to the Lord himself. In some cases, they are servants of the Lord, like the conch shell or whatever like that. They're the actual servant of the Lord. And they're also chit, not material things. They have substance which is made out of the chit shakti of the Lord. So not temporary, not dull matter like this matter. And these particular symbols are directly related to the Lord. They're eternally with the Lord. Just like with Krishna, we also find in Vrindavan he has his garland and his flute and his crown and his peacock feather. Again, not material. They are completely spiritual. So a demon can never hope to acquire these spiritual objects. All he can do is get things that belong to the material world. Just as even a devotee like Brahma cannot touch the cowherd boys or the calves because he's got a material body. So he can't even touch them and put them to sleep or anything. So what to speak of a demon? How he can take the Lord's symbols like his Sudarshan chakra. He can't even touch it. It's completely different from him. It's a spiritual object. So all of this is very foolish, Panduraka, to demand the spiritual objects that are in possession of the Lord. He cannot touch them at all. What to speak of possess them and use them. We see, of course, that the Sudarshan chakra became the tool of Ambarish because he was the devotee of the Lord. So then the Lord gave him the Sudarshan chakra for his protection, and Sudarshan chakra became the servant of Ambarish, the devotee. So yes, the devotees can touch these symbols and use these symbols nicely, not the demons. So this shows the exalted position of the devotee, that even though the Lord has his personal symbols, he's willing to lend them to the devotees. But the demon cannot demand these things from the Lord at all. The Lord, of course, would not be willing to give them to him. And even if he got it, he could not even touch it. He could not control it. He could not use it at all. Because it only responds to Supreme Lord and the devotee, not to the demon at all. So Panduraka has a very foolish conception of the Lord and his weapons, etc., because he thinks they're all material things that you can demand, just as when a king, he comes to another king and he says, okay, you fight with me and surrender, or you give me everything you have. You give me your crown, give me your throne, give me this, okay, I won't fight with you, but you surrender. So either way, it's a surrender. Either you fight and get defeated and I take everything, or you don't fight and you give me everything voluntarily. So this happens in the material world. You can exchange material things, or by conquest gather material things. You cannot do that with the Lord. The Lord is not a material being. His possessions, his ornaments are not material. So you cannot take them. Of course, you cannot even defeat the Lord in any way. What to speak of demand them from the Lord. So therefore all of this is foolishness on the part of Panduraka. But because he is got a very materialistic mind, therefore he acts in this way. And then he demands, you surrender to me. And if you don't, then I'll have to fight with you and defeat you. So his motive, we see ultimately, is that he wants to be supreme, and Krishna should be his servant. That's all. And it says, you surrender unto me. So, as the Bhagavad Gita explains when it describes the demons, it says the demon is thinking, how much I have now, and tomorrow I'll get more and more and more and more wealth. I'm the enjoyer. I am supreme. I'm the controller, etc. So this is a graphic description of the materialistic person, and that we see here is exactly what Panduraka is thinking. This is his mentality. So though it may sound very extreme, it is subtly present in all people in the material world. And unless they get rid of that, then they are hopeless. So the first stage in devotion is to accept the fact that there is a Supreme Lord and I am the servant of the Lord. Opposite. And if we accept that, that's the beginning of Bhakti. Don't accept that, then we cannot begin the process. So therefore that faith in the existence of a Lord and I'm the servant of the Lord, that is very necessary for Bhakti. So that's called the qualification for Bhakti. And based on that, we accept all the scriptures that tell us like that, like Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita. So we have faith in the concept, faith in the scriptures that tell us that, and then we can begin the process of Bhakti, but otherwise not. So as long as a person is of this mentality, then following the process of Bhakti is hopeless. So, in this case, the Lord has another alternative. Kill him, and then he gets liberation. That's all. But he doesn't get devotional. So that's the solution for this type of person, when the Lord is personally present.
Guru Maharaj, what is the specialty of him getting this opportunity to see Lord face to face? What was he in the previous life? How come he came that
Well, we find that Panduraka and others were also, they were associated with other. We have Shishupala and Dandavakra and Panduraka. It doesn't say actually who he was previously, but we can infer there were also great demons, and probably, as in the case of Shishupala, etc., they had some association with the Lord, fighting them as demons or whatever. It doesn't exactly say all the demons, but we can infer there must have something like that, because getting personally killed by the Lord also is some sort of great favor the Lord gives to them. So to get personal association, perhaps they were also associated with the Lord previously as a demon.
He never knew that Krishna was supreme, I just challenged.
Who's that?
The fight with Krishna wants to be very strong. Hamsa we see different, but Panduraka was previously any close associate or just ordinary? He get his strength to fight with the Lord.
Oh well, of course, all this strength is useless, because no matter how strong a person in the material world, it doesn't make, it's nothing. It's only material elements. It's nothing in comparison to spiritual elements, or spiritual world, or spiritual body. So therefore, no comparison really. The strongest person in the material world, useless. We see, of course, in the material world we have elements, and we have weather, and so many things, and we have pralaya taking place, etc. All of this is also useless. It is just one spark of material energy, and it is all one. That whole material universe is so small it fits into the pore of Mahavishnu. It's nothing, and it gets destroyed by the will of Vishnu himself. Just by saying destroy, it gets destroyed. The whole universe, and everything in it, and the fire, and the water, and whatever, all the pralaya, everything, all simply disappears suddenly by the will of Vishnu. So no matter how strong a person is in the material world, actually hopeless that he can fight against the Supreme Lord. Many people. Who was the one that was Kalki on his horse? Another foolishness like this.
Can you comment on the report of Srila Vishwanath Thakur saying very interesting thing? Is it a point of view of a devotee? How he sees floating?
Well, Sanskrit is such that sometimes the words can be taken to have different meanings, sometimes very clear, and we don't take a different meaning. Often in the case of statements of demons where they criticize the Lord, the acharyas find another meaning there because they cannot tolerate criticism of the Lord. So then they'll take the Sanskrit and find another meaning there. So that's why it says here, Saraswati has produced this meaning, which means with skill of words, we can find another meaning to which is opposite of the intention of the demon when he says those words. Also in the case of Hiranyaksha, the same. Words get interpreted in another way, even though he's criticizing Vishnu. So then the devotee finds another meaning of the words where it's actually praise. So that praise is not the intention of the demon, and by any means, but the nature of the devotee, we can say maybe the Bhagavatam itself is ultimately, it never wants to criticize the Lord. So therefore, even in the critical words of the demons, we'll find there is opposite meaning there.
So we see that this is episode of bad association, where because of the association of his associates, he thinks that he himself is Krishna and is acting in his way. But this is never ever given as an example for bad association.
Well, actually, all the demons we find here were associated with each other. So there's Jarasandha and Salva and Panduraka and Dantavakra and Shishupala. They were actually all in one group. So they were all friends. Kamsa also. They were all associates of Kamsa, all these people. So that's we can say the bad association. They were all in one group. And the whole purpose of, one of the purposes of Krishna in appearing in the material world at the request of the devotees was to get rid of all these persons. Because they were creating such disturbance on the earth. So it was not just one demon, but all together. And they were all, we can say, friends, associates.
See the contrast here when Dhruva Maharaj, when he saw the Lord face to face, he wants mental benediction, he became purified. So whenever the non-devotees or demons see the Lord, they get more angry. Like Hiranyakashipu, Narasimha, they become very angry. The question is, the Lord is so powerful, in the vicinity of the Lord, the person has to get purified. So getting purified, he spits more venom.
Well, they do get purified, and therefore it is said that even in hatred you can approach the Lord. Generally that may take place when the Lord's personally present. And in that hatred, one concentrates on the Lord, and to that concentration, then one gets purified. And so when Shishupal got killed, then he got a spiritual body because of that, because he was purified already. So he got a spiritual body, and he got some prema or something like prema in the spiritual world because of that. So that's, of course, not bhakti, but that means that the Lord, in any case, is powerful. However, in the case of Krishna, that's when we see remarkable effects, even for hatred. It's not so for Nrsimhadev or Ramchandra, because in those previous births, Hiranyakashipu and Ravana did not even get liberation. What to speak of getting a spiritual body. Why? Because it wasn't Krishna. They didn't see Krishna. But when Shishupal saw Krishna, then he was so attractive that he concentrated on them in anger. So that concentration in anger produced a better result. What didn't happen with other forms of the Lord. So when Krishna fights with the demon, very special effect is there, because they concentrate on Krishna because he's so attractive, even they're in hatred of him.
It is said that Prahlad Maharaj, he also practiced this How is that a devotee that get rid of those roads?
Why would he do so? Well, I think in the case of Prahlad, I think he makes these statements just to indicate his low nature or something, not that he actually believes something like that. Because he got the mercy of Narada Muni and he was, devotee of the Lord, but he says, I share the mentality of demons and like that, and I'm an impersonalist because the demons like Hiranyakasipu will lecture on impersonalism sometimes, you're not the body, etc. So they have some idea like that sometimes. Even that is not constant. But he's more or less out of humility. He expresses himself, I'm doing this and doing that, so I'm not a real devotee.
Remember, Goddess Saraswati is in charge of knowledge. Is part of Maya.
This is different Saraswati. A spiritual. Cannot be the same Saraswati. Material knowledge and spiritual knowledge. We can say I don't know, there's a spiritual, what they would call the spiritual Saraswati in charge of scripture. Because anyway, different because it's spiritual. So.
Or is it only Lord Hayagriva is in charge of spiritual?
Well, he also is in charge of knowledge. In charge of knowledge in the spiritual world. So they worship Hayagriva for vidya, for knowledge. But that's spiritual knowledge, of course.
ग्रंथरा श्री श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, सोनस बन महाराज की जय, जिमेंद्र श्री भक्ति